On the tape called Ending Self-Punishment, Lazaris suggests that all excesses, everything done compulsively or excessively, regardless of the thought, the feeling, the activity, the substance, is a way of avoiding pain. But he does not go into how and why. For example, why would someone who is in pain, first of all, want to avoid it as opposed to resolve it? And second of all, why would someone who is in pain do something to excess, even painful excess, right? Anyone who's had an addiction understands that at first there's a little bit of pleasure, or a lot of it, but then over time, right, as you have one bite of chocolate cake and it's delicious, you have a second bite of chocolate cake. If you keep eating chocolate cake, it eventually becomes sickening, painful, uncomfortable. And so why push an activity into pain as a way of avoiding pain? Now, aside from the benefit of, more dialogue and conversation in the seminars, in the workshops to kind of go flush all these things out, this is something that anyone, right, that's what I'm doing here, is thinking about, responding, looking at my own experience. And what I want to suggest is that in the grid of experience, right, down here is kind of the worst possible human experience imaginable, and up here is the best type of human experience imaginable. And it's worth having a sense of what those polarities are. Up here, as far as I can tell, the pinnacle of human peak experience is conscious, sustainable fun. Now, Lazaris talks about the two mandatory focuses that all humans have, in his opinion. And one is consciously creating success, and the other is consciously creating fun. Now, I would say that you can't have peak fun without being successful. Meaning, if you're trying to get something done and you repeatedly fail to get it done, it's less fun than trying to get something done and repeatedly succeeding at getting it done. It's more fun to succeed. Now, our definition of success is more cultured, meaning cult programmed, and so it's much narrower. In the connotations with the word success, it's quite possible to be successful and miserable, right? I learned that the hard way when I had a great job, wonderful house, could travel, lots of free time, a job that many people would envy. And people kept telling me how successful I was. And I was feeling worse than I could recall feeling. Right? In fact, my my adult questions about suicide were at that time, because it isn't until all the trappings that promise happiness and well-being are fulfilled that one can be clear that they're not going to bring about well-being or sustainable well-being, right? Like if you feel miserable and you're in debt, you have a job that you hate, and you're homeless, you don't have any money, and you've got medical problems, well, the cult will promise you that if you sort all that out, then you will live happily ever after. And that's a believable and somewhat reasonable story until you sort all of that out, succeed in all of those areas, and are more miserable than before. Now, the misery from before stays about the same, but when there's hope that if you get these things sorted out, then the misery will go away, that hope tempers the misery. It says, well, just wait a little bit. Once we're debt-free, once we're this, once we've got enough money, then you can, then the misery will go away, so it won't be long. You can endure, right, chronic misery if it won't be long. But if you're already eating better, healthy, vegetarian, organic food than 95% of the planet, if you have a nicer house than 95% of the planet, if you have a nicer job than 95% of the planet, more money than 95% of the planet, no debt, no health, challenges, and you can buy all the things that you want to buy, and you can travel. Well, if the misery is exactly what it was before, only there's no hope in terms of, there's no sense of, once what, right? If and then there's hopes about therapies and hopes about metaphysics and hopes about this and hopes. But, if you've done more meditations than 95% of the planet, you've done more techniques than 95% of the planet, you've achieved thousands of goals more than 95% of the planet, you've got more crystals than 95% of the planet. You've been to more therapists. You've done more therapy. You've done more massage. You've done more Reiki. You've done more this than 95% of the planet. And there's the pain. There's the misery, right? So that arrival without the cessation of pain, plus there's hedonic adaptation that kicks in, meaning all those luxuries quickly fade and become normal. They're no longer exciting or accomplishments. Right? If you drink the best cup of coffee every single day, it fades into the background. Right? If you glance at the most wonderful Lazaris crystal every day, it stops having an impact because the brain always deprioritizes whatever's familiar and prioritizes pain, problems, and anything unusual. So the brain always prioritizes pain and problems over what's good. That's a survival bias. But it also prioritizes novelty, right? And that creates a little bit of this treadmill dynamic of more than I want and need, but just so it's new, so that the brain can have a few days to notice it, right? But if you do something new and new and new and new, the brain stops prioritizing that as well. All that is to say, one can be successful without having elevated levels of fun in the way that convention define success. However, I guess the dimensions and definitions of fun might also be shallow, but I think it's a pretty reasonable leap to say that it's more fun to be successful than it is to fail. It's probably more successful to have fun than it is not to have fun. It's just that many people are doing the exact opposite, right? They're taking on higher stress, higher levels of responsibility, higher levels of sacrifice so that they can be successful, right? So it's not as counterintuitive. But if you do look at most values, they are like, why do you value freedom? Because it's free, but confinement is confinement. Freedom is free, confinement is confinement, right? Why do you want to be free? Well, because it's more fun to be free than it is to be imprisoned, right? Why do you want to be powerful? So I can do all these things, but why do you want to do all those things, right? Because it's more fun to be able to do all those things, right? Why do you want to, believe in honesty? Well, it's more fun to trust and be trusted, to see and be seen, than it is to be invisible, right? If the world is opaque, and we say, oh, I'm over here, but really we're over here. When they come and connect and talk to this fantasy over here, they're not really talking to you. They're talking to your lie. But meanwhile, you're over here alone because you didn't think that the truth would be loved, would be connected with. You told a lie, and people are loving and connecting with the lie, or hating the lie and betraying the lie, either way. But it's not you, right? So just about every value, I want to be more confident. Why? Well, it's more fun to be confident, and it's more fun to experience the reality that comes from confidence. But when you ask, why do you want to have fun? It's simple. Because it's more fun to have fun than not to have fun, right? Fun is the first self-referential value. And you do have ecstasy, ecstasis, like transcendence, beyond. But transcendence is more fun than non-transcendence, right? To depart and transcend the paradigm, to transcend the identity, is more fun than to be trapped in the pattern, to be totally identified with the pattern, right? So conscious, sustainable fun is the only self-referential end. It's more fun to have fun, and I want to have fun because it's more fun, right? So that is the pinnacle. Like there's nowhere to go. Like all the other values serve something. I want to be fit and healthy. Why? Because it's more fun to be fit and healthy, right? I want to have money. Why? Because it's more fun than not having money, right? I want to have sex. Why? Because it's more fun to have sex than not to have sex. So that's the highest. Now, what's the lowest point in this continuum? I would say it's pain, but there are a variety of different types of pain, right? There's chronic pain, stable pain, volatile pain, unvolatile pain, intense pain, mild pain. There's pain within your control. There's pain outside of control. There's pain that is humiliating, and there's pain that is not humiliating. There's pain that is betrayal, and there's pain that is just an unfortunate situation, right? It wasn't anyone's betrayal. It just was an earthquake. Nobody noticed, right? And you're in pain, right? Now, there's pain that you're getting help for, and there's pain that you are being abandoned for. So there's lots of different types of pain. Now, the worst human experience, as far as I can ascertain, is traumatic pain. That is chronic. That means PTSD. That is helpless, meaning that no one is helping. They're not trying, they're not trying to, they're not tuning in, they're busy off in their own world. That is helpless. That is a function of betrayal. Right? Someone betrayed you in a certain way. And that's how you ended up in this. The car mechanic saved a few bucks, put in a used part. You're a quadriplegic because the brake cord snapped so that a mechanic could save a couple of bucks. They told you it was new. They charged you a lot of money. Then they denied it, right? Wouldn't give a refund, complete, betrayal. But then your friends, you're no fun anymore, you're a quadriplegic, and off they go, right? And it's chronic, no end in sight, helpless and intense pain. I would add a certain element to that makes it a little bit worse, which would be shock. Like, let's just say that randomly, severe unbearable pain just floods in. And let's say that anytime someone touches you or pats you on the back, like a sunburn type phenomena, that you've got a pinched nerve and it's horrific and nobody listens. You keep saying, don't touch me on the back, And so, there's a sense of invisibility. There's a sense of constant waiting for the next hit, waiting for the shoe to drop. It's tremendous chronic pain. And everyone has abandoned you, and they're lying about it because they don't want to feel bad about abandoning you. So they're lying about it. Oh, I've gotten busy and all that, right? And they've all suddenly gotten busy and can't do this and can't do that. And the bank that's been trying to loan you a bunch of money forever, courting your business, suddenly pulls the loan because you actually need it. And you feel just an enormous amount of helpless pain. There's nothing you can do about it. Well, there is something you can do about it. If that's the lowest, right? The first thing you can do is, you feel powerless. That's part of being helpless. That's part of it. So it's powerless, betrayal, chronic pain, lies, invisibility. And of course, there's a message being delivered beneath all of that pain, which is, you're not worth it. You're not lovable, right? All the people, like your partner leaves you because you're not going to make a lot of money and aren't, so there's a message that says you're not worth it. You're not lovable. You're not worth spending an extra $5 for a better part. You're not worth apologizing to. You're not worth visiting at the hospital. You're not worth staying around and helping you through. You're not worth friendship. So there's a deep message around that, and that's part. That is really the worst possible pain, is believing that story, right? I'm not lovable. But you can get rid of a few things with self-punishment. Banging your head against the wall, for example. first of all, you take away the shock element, right? If you up the pain rather than waiting for it, it takes away the suspense. If you hurt yourself, it takes away the powerlessness. If you turn away from help, it takes away the feeling of helplessness. When you say, no, I don't want anyone to help me. But this is why people do this. Right? This is why people self-inflict pain and disdain help and all of that, is they're reducing the cofactors in the worst possible pain. So I don't want anyone's help. I don't want to be around people where they can kind of hurt me. I'm turning away before I can be betrayed further, right? Blaming myself adds power, right? It's my fault. I walked in the alley that got raped, and now I'm hitting myself. I'm cutting myself, right? It's my fault. So what we're getting there is power. And we're also saying that, once we fix our fault, then all those sociopathic people who don't have the competence and desire to learn how to support me in this, they'll come back because it's my fault. It's not that I'm dealing with a sociopathic environment. It's all my fault, right? Then they'll also feel less guilty and maybe say, no, well, we could have done more ourselves, right? But if you say, look, it's all your fault, right? You're a bunch of fucked up friends. This is not friends. Right? You didn't do this, and as soon as I need you, you all run off. This isn't friends, right? Most people will just run off some more, right? But if you blame yourself, right? I'm sorry, right? I'm sorry that I got in a car accident. I'm such poor fun, right? So this is self-abuse, blaming oneself, so as not to make other people feel inadequate, so that they won't run from their feeling of inadequacy. So self-inflicted pain, right, and also PTSD and its chronic, horrific memories, those are very, very painful memories that we lack the science. Lazaris lacks the science to do anything about, right? He's may have talked to Vietnam veterans, but if you do a statistical poll of how many Vietnam veterans are cured of PTSD because, they hung out with Lazaris versus the ones that didn't, right? I'm not aware of a single instance of a cure, which means chronic, horrific hell, right? And if Lazaris says you create your own reality and the only reason you're staying on with that chronic, horrific hell is because you've got payoffs, your negative ego is trying to destroy you, well, maybe you don't deserve sympathy then, right? Because you tried doing the techniques, whatever, they didn't work, but you're obviously a bad person. Must have an agenda for keeping that from working. And so now you've got a new shame, right? Why didn't you create it better, right? Now you've got to hide from your metaphysicians, right? And so self-blame and shame, these are ways of taking control so as to not be abandoned, right? When I went through massive PTSD and needed the most help, I had a 95% rejection rate, meaning at my most desperate moments where I wanted help, "95% of the people would make it clear that they wish I didn't exist without actually helping." So that's about as sociopathic as it gets, right? I wish you didn't exist because the fact that you're in massive amounts of pain and I don't want to do something about it makes me look bad. And so I blame you for making me look bad. Just go away and stop existing. Well, that pain is so high, right? At such low odds. Obviously, if there was 100% response rate of please help me, oh, how can we help? Well, you could sit with me and hold my hand and help me to calm down and breathe. Okay, I can do that. Happy to do it, right? What's the result? Well, I feel 50% better in 10 minutes. Great. Glad you asked, and ask anytime. I've got 10 minutes to reduce chronic suffering by 100%. And I'd be like, oh, thank you, right? And then you'd ask somebody else, right? But when 95% of people are actually in a direct or indirect way punishing you, right? Wishing you didn't exist, not helping, blaming, avoiding, whatever, then there's this desperate thing, but that is such a devastating response to real need and real pain. And you realize the world is not my friend, right? That is painful. That's a painful response. It's a painful reality, that 10 minutes is too much. I remember being in a Thai hotel, dreading going back to the US because it's much colder sociopathically in the US than it is in Thailand. And, the physical pain, the mental, emotional pain, combined with the efforted coldness, the efforted dissociation in the US, I wasn't sure I'd be able to face it. And I was having chronic stomach pain just because it was such a painful thing to get ready to go back to the US. And the hotel asked if they could help, and I said, yes, if any of the staff could hold my hand and be with me for a few hours, that would be great. And this is a 5-star hotel that can accommodate, they'll get you prostitutes if you want prostitutes, right? Get you drugs if you want drugs. They'll get you anything but humanity, right? Doesn't cost a penny. You don't need to speak English. Well, this threw the hotel into massive chaos, right? What, is there anything else? Can we get you a doctor? Well, it depends. Can the doctor look me in the eye and hold my hand? No, he can give you expensive. No, I don't need that. Right? What about a monk down at the temple? I can't walk down there, but a monk, no. So what they ended up doing was locking my sliding glass door on the 20th floor so that I couldn't commit suicide as easily, and then having numerous meetings, consuming probably about 200 people's attention to avoid one person being human enough to sit with another person in pain. Now, this is laughable. It's pathetic, right? It's a joke. And it is the joke that we live in, right? But, right, that negatively affected my relationship with the hotel. One, because I didn't get what I needed and asked for. And so it's like, how dumb do you have to be not to understand what it is to be a human being? Pretty well trained, right? You go to a tribe, you go to some rural vision or some rural town, just about anywhere. And if you haven't been trained to be a sociopath, you know what to do. Here, come in, have a cup of tea, let's sit together, right? But this hotel had been trained by a Swiss manager, right? Precision in all things, the right temperature in the coffee, the this, that, right? just no humanity. So that's a miserable experience. And if that comes to be the norm, do you want to ask and look at the sheer cruelty and stupidity of a brainwashed cult not able to fit humanity into their protocol, right? So it's easier to drink or to self-harm, right? Because, it says, well, they can't all be wrong. There's nothing wrong with you. It must be me, right? And so that's self-punishment. So how does this tie in with what Lazaris is saying about excesses, right? Anything you do to excess is a form of pain management. Well, it has a couple of things. When you have more traumatic pain than your ego can digest, massive amounts of pain, right? I just have a small digestion capacity in an emotionally illiterate cult. Well, how do you stop from being overwhelmed and losing coherence and losing your identity disintegrates because it's too traumatic, it's too much to respond to? Well, horses, right, or I should say people wanting to drive horses on roads have the same problem with horses, because if the horse can see cars racing by at 50 miles an hour and this and that, the horse cannot digest all that. Its eyes, its body was not designed to stay straight and ignore these massive objects rushing around. And so what they do is they put blinders on the horse. And the blinders calm the horse down by limiting stimulation to what the horse can actually deal with, which is the road ahead. As a result, the horse does not die, right? Because the reactions of a terrified horse are not fitted to having a carriage strapped on their back, right? They're supposed to be able to leap the hedge, but they can't because of the carriage. They fall on top of the hedge, or if they, so the horse is protected by tunnel vision. And this is exactly what compulsion does for someone in traumatic pain. If you continually stimulate yourself in a very narrow field, it distracts from all this stuff out here. So one of the main things that people do in overwhelmed trauma is they find something and chronically do it, right? Autistic people rock back and forth, right? Because then their own stimulation is keeping them in their own body so they can tune out all the stuff that's too much, right? And so they're rocking back and forth, right? But you can also binge watch Netflix. You can always think, I'm a bad person, 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 right? And it blocks all that other stuff out, right? So when you do something compulsively, it does cause pain. Pain from blind spots, pain from exhaustion, fatigue. It's not enjoyable, but it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to do two things. It's supposed to take the powerless out of the equation, right? Because the lowest point is to be in pain and powerless and helpless and betrayed. So you take, I'm no longer powerless, I'm causing this pain myself. I have agency. Secondly, it's giving me tunnel vision. I'm repeating and repeating and repeating, and I'm not staying out of the lane. So it gives me a breather where the stimulation outside does not bother me. The third thing is it gives me a sense of anticipated results, right? Because it's very familiar. When you pick one thing and repeat one thing rather than change it, every time you change, the world changes. If you do just one thing, the world doesn't change very much, relatively speaking, right? And so you've got a little bit more predictability, which gives you a sense of safety. The final thing is when you hurt yourself, and you can see this with children who hurt themselves when they anticipate being punished, like they'll cut themselves or they'll fall over and get dirty, or they'll make up a story of how they were beaten up or whatever, because they know their parent wants to beat them, wants to punish them in a very painful way. And so they'll do it to themselves first, understanding that what the abuser wants is to transfer their helplessness and their rage over to the victim. So if they do it to themselves, there may be a little bit less pain, but there's more power and there's no shock. The most debilitating state that you can induce into, for example, a dog is called learned helplessness. This is where you put a dog in a cage and erratically electrically shock them. And the dog will do everything in their power to escape, to try this side of the cage, that, standing, sitting. But if the shock continues erratically, the dog quickly learns that nothing they can or cannot do will stop the pain. So they're just going to sit there and do absolutely nothing, right? But if the dog caused the pain to themselves, then there's the illusion of control, right? They may have caused it to themselves because they know they're going to be beaten or singled out or bullied if it isn't done to them, right? Bullies will attack a victim until they're comatose or in surrender in some way, and maybe they'll keep attacking them, but bullies will never let up with anyone who's fighting back, right? And so the do it to myself first is I'll get into the little box that you want to make me feel helpless and worthless and all of that. And then I'll have control and I'll avoid the shock and you'll have the sense of power. Now this is progress, right? Now we've got pain and humiliation, but it is with agency and without the shock, right? So there is a logic to that. And that logic remains until you, one, deal with the overwhelming pain so it's not so overwhelming. Two, you do not have an abusive environment that is going to erratically push you into that helpless state. And three, that you've learned another way to live, right? Once you've learned have those three things, you can let go of the self-punishment and progress. If you let go of the self-punishment when you've got an older brother who is committed to making you feel miserable every single day, then your misery does not go down. Your agency around the misery goes down. So now you are being helplessly made to feel miserable rather than just allowing or doing it to yourself with agency. So, these are nuances that give empathy, that give human context, which I think it would benefit people working with a tape like self-punishment to understand.